Your phone will ring at 3:17 p.m. exactly, I said. No one in the room moved. For a full beat, they just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then laughter. First from her attorney, my wife's boss. Then from her. A short, smug exhale through her nose as she reached for her lemon water. Even the junior associate behind them stifled a smirk behind a legal pad. Desperate bluff, the boss said, shaking his head. I've seen better lines in a soap opera. He looked at me like I was a malfunctioning piece of office furniture. Something old and sad that had stuck around too long. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I just looked at the clock on the wall. 2:51 p.m. I timed it down to the second. You spend years building a life with someone. Holding up the quiet, invisible parts. Taxes filed, insurance paid, groceries stocked, passwords remembered, cars maintained, birthdays not forgotten. Not the stuff people toast to, but the stuff that keeps a house from collapsing. And then one day, someone walks in with a fake smile and a better title, and suddenly you're just extra. Obsolete. An afterthought in your own life. That's what they turn me into. If you've ever been the man in the corner of the room, the one who paid the bills while she built her independence, the one who stepped back so she could grow, then maybe this won't sound crazy to you. Maybe you'll understand why I didn't shout, why I didn't slam the table or demand anything. I just waited. And I planned. By the way, if you're listening to this, and you're one of the many who never hits that subscribe button, maybe take a second to do it. It helps us bring more of these stories to life. This one, you're going to want to hear how it ends. Let's just keep it moving, my wife said, flipping through the draft asset schedule like she was reviewing a catering invoice. We don't have all day. They'd booked the mediation room for 3 hours. Modern, glass-walled, chrome furniture, pitcher of cucumber water on the table. Like a Silicon Valley startup had tried to cosplay as a courtroom. Her boss, Trevor something, doesn't matter, was the lead counsel on her side. A partner at the firm, her direct superior, and, as I learned 17 months ago, also her confidant. The affair wasn't even subtle. I found out from the way she started overpronouncing legal jargon at dinner and changed her password naming convention. She didn't just cheat on me, she plagiarized her lies. The car goes to her, Trevor said. You barely used it anyway. I blinked. I paid for it in full, I said. And it depreciates, he replied. Let's stay on topic. He waved his hand toward the envelope my lawyer had placed on the table. He hadn't touched it. No one had. It just sat there. Still sealed. Still patient. And what's that? He asked, eyes gleaming. Your manifesto? I'd open it around 3:18, my lawyer said flatly. Jesus, Trevor muttered, already bored. My wife leaned back in her chair. Are we done with the dramatics? She said. I'm just here to finalize this and move on with my life. I turned to her. You already did that part. What we're finalizing is the cost. She blinked. Trevor chuckled again and leaned toward me, elbows on the table like we were old poker buddies. Look, I get it, he said. This is a loss. You're lashing out. But let's be honest, she built this life. You just tagged along. Maybe if you'd been more ambitious, we wouldn't be here. There it was. They always say it. You can spend a decade being dependable, but the moment you're not flashy, not climbing, not conquering, suddenly, you're a footnote. A supporting character in her big, bold reboot. I checked the clock. 2:58 p.m. He leaned back, satisfied with himself, and turned his attention to a document about intellectual property carve-outs. It was comical. The IP clause they kept skipping past was exactly where the fuse sat. My lawyer tapped his pen. No one noticed. Are you sure you don't want to make a counter-proposal? Trevor said, lips curling. I smiled. Oh, I already have. Where? I nodded at the envelope. He didn't look. They never do, until it's too late. Only one person had gone quiet in the last half hour. The intern sitting behind them, typing notes. He kept glancing at me. Something in the way I spoke, too calm, too precise, had registered. Or maybe he was just smart enough to sense the weather was about to turn. Trevor waved to the intern. Can you grab me a soda from the fridge? The kid didn't move. Trevor frowned. 3:03 p.m. I folded my hands. Everything you're trying to take, I said, rests on one very specific assumption. Oh yeah. Trevor smirked. And what's that? That you understand what you're sitting on. Try me. I didn't reply. He didn't know that I'd seen the internal Slack messages. The ones where they bragged about repackaging my code for their new product launch. He didn't know I'd already blind copied 2 of their investors with a document labeled Urgent Due Diligence Breach. And he certainly didn't know what Clause 7 meant. But he was about to learn. By the time the clock hit 3:17, he would understand everything. And he would never laugh like that again. The first time she called it a nerd's hobby, I let it slide. We were still married then, barely. She'd walked in late from some networking thing and saw the code scrolling on my monitor. "Still playing with that data scraper?" she asked, toeing off her shoes like the carpet bored her. "You're like a middle-aged teenager in a basement." I just nodded, closed the terminal window, let her believe it was nothing. What I had built wasn't flashy. No AI avatars or blockchain jargon. It was a lean, brutal little engine, scraping, parsing, mapping consumer trends faster than anything on the open market. I didn't sell it. I licensed it, quietly, under a Delaware LLC no one could trace back to me. Signed exactly 3 contracts over the course of 6 years. Never made noise. But that hobby turned out to be the foundation of her startup pitch 2 years later. She came home one night glowing. "We got seed funding," she said. "They loved the predictive logic model I built." I didn't ask what logic model. Didn't need to. I'd seen her borrowing phrasing from my notes. One of her slide decks even lifted a line directly from my internal documentation. "Trends don't wait. They whisper before they shout." That line was mine. Had been for years. She was clever, just not in the ways that mattered. She thought if you changed the file names, if you reskinned the UI, if you adjusted the font, it became new. What she never understood was that code isn't a look. It's a signature. And mine had prints all over the guts of her product. At first, I said nothing. I was still naive enough to think she'd give credit. That she'd maybe mention where the core logic came from in an interview. But no. She went on to build an entire narrative of female founder breakthrough, complete with glowing fast company pieces and Instagram-ready investor brunches. Meanwhile, the engine underneath her polished front end was the same damn thing she mocked years ago. And then she joined Trevor's firm. That's when I knew I had to burn it down. Because the second her product was absorbed into their portfolio, repackaged and pitched to a defense contractor, no less, they triggered something they didn't even know existed. Clause 5. Unauthorized rebranding constitutes breach of license. Clause 7. Use by spouse's employer revokes license in full. They violated both. In writing, in public, in recorded meetings and email chains and investor calls. I pulled the license from the drawer. It was dated, dusty, but airtight. A lawyer had once told me it was needlessly paranoid. Good. I'd built it for a world exactly like this. From there, I went quiet. Strategic. I met with someone I trusted, an IP attorney who used to work for a major music label. He was the kind of guy who could sue you without you knowing until the third letter arrived. We spent 2 weeks tracing the footprint of the stolen code. He found it embedded not just in the source, but in the architecture of their new product. Every predictive feature had at least one of my original logic trees. We even found a Slack message where Trevor wrote, "As long as no one digs into the original logic, we're fine." That one went straight into the file. But I didn't just want to pay out. I didn't want to negotiate ownership or be written a 7-figure hush check. That would have meant letting them keep the throne they stole. No, I wanted rupture. Ruin. A clean break from everything they built on me. So we prepped the nuclear option, the snap clause. It was buried in the license, page 14, paragraph 6. If triggered, it not only revoked all usage rights, but required notification to all third-party users, investors, and vendors within 24 hours, or they'd be considered complicit. It wasn't a penalty clause. It was a threat multiplier. The trigger? A simple call from a registered officer of the shell company me. My lawyer set the timing. 3:17 p.m. Not random. Not dramatic flair. Just the minute the stock market hit its lowest volatility peak of the afternoon, ensuring the message would cut through the noise when our blind copied notices hit inboxes. I rehearsed what I would say on the call. 11 seconds. No more. Legal confirmations only. Enough to verify the revocation. The rest would fall like dominoes. Trevor didn't know any of this. He sat across from me in that sleek little conference room, sipping sparkling water and tossing out settlement numbers like a game show host. And every time he raised his voice to talk over me, every time he dismissed me as the husband, I checked the clock again. The countdown wasn't theatrical. It was surgical. They thought this was about alimony. They had no idea the entire firm's valuation rested on a stolen backbone. And I was about to snap it. And the best part? They'd laugh. Right up until the moment that phone rang. It started with a name. A whisper, really, passed to me through an old friend who once handled acquisitions for a Fortune 100 company. "If you're serious," he said, "you need to talk to Reed Carrington. He doesn't play fair, but he plays clean. If there's a hidden structure to dismantle, he's the guy who knows where the beams are." Reed wasn't what I expected. No suit, no assistant, no marble desk. Just a narrow office above a laundromat downtown, and a wall of legal books with too many tabs. He greeted me in jeans and a linen shirt, barefoot, sipping a turmeric smoothie that looked like wet drywall. "You're the husband," he said flatly. "Let's talk about leverage." I handed him the manila folder. It took him 3 minutes to stop skimming. "You built this?" he asked, tapping the license. "Line by line. And they used it. They used it, dressed it up, and called it wholly original." He chuckled. Not kindly. More like a man watching someone walk into traffic. "Did they file patents?" "Provisional ones," I said. "Based on my architecture." He leaned back and looked at the ceiling like he was speaking to God. "Jesus, they're dumber than I thought." The next 10 days were a masterclass in legal demolition. We started with metadata, version histories, timestamps, project commits. My old code base had fingerprints in places they didn't even know were exposed. A custom logging function I wrote in 2017 was still running under a different name. Same signature. Same logic flaw I'd left in by mistake. That flaw, now it was evidence. Then we moved to internal documents. Screenshots, Slack messages, design prototypes. One message from her product lead read, "We just need to change the interface and scrub any source overlap. Trevor says it'll pass scrutiny." I highlighted the word scrub. Sent it to Reed. He laughed for 5 straight seconds. "Scrub implies there was something dirty," he said. "That's all we need." The deeper we went, the more arrogant they looked. In one pitch deck to Series B investors, Trevor had quoted a line directly from the license preamble. "Adaptive learning is prediction without noise." That was my sentence. I wrote it in a coffee shop 6 years ago with a migraine and no sleep. And now it was a slide between 2 photos of smiling developers, none of whom had ever touched a compiler. Reed built the case like a sniper building a nest. Quiet, cold, surgical. "This is more than a breach," he said. "This is coordinated fraud. And with the right trigger, we don't just hit them, we collapse the roof." That's when he told me about the snap clause. Not many people use them. They're rare, brutal, and require incredible timing. Essentially, a self-destruct protocol buried inside a license agreement. Triggered not by use, but by misuse, traced to a third-party exploit. In our case, her employer, Trevor's firm. The clause was like a legal landmine. It didn't go off when they stepped on it. It went off when they built a mansion over it and gave a TED Talk on the landscaping. The snap clause had 4 components. Immediate revocation of all rights to use or distribute the codebase. Mandatory notice to all known investors and business partners. Automatic filing of breach notice with relevant regulatory bodies. Optional litigation, pending review of damages, set conservatively at $9.8 million. And the best part? I didn't need to sue them to ruin them. The clause handled the demolition for me. The moment the trigger was confirmed, by a call, a timestamp, and a digital signature, the obligations activated. And Reed had already scheduled the auto emails, the filing timestamps, the investor pings. The timing mattered. We picked 3:17 p.m. because that's when the West Coast's tech PR cycle dips between daily briefings. It would hit inboxes when people were still at their desks, but too late to spin a press release. Too late to lie. Everything was scheduled down to the second. Reed even paid extra to cue a press contact at a tech blog to publish a teaser headline as soon as the filings hit public record. It would look like news. It was news. But to Trevor and my wife, it would feel like a trapdoor opening beneath them in real time. As we finalized the package, Reed looked at me across his desk. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "Because once we pull the pin, there's no deal, no NDA, no going back. It won't just cost them money. It'll mark them. Industry-wide." I stared at the black folder in front of me. "They used me," I said. "Treated me like a dumb spare part. And now they're walking into a boardroom built on stolen foundation." "Then let's return the favor," Reed said, and locked the file shut. The next day, we set the trigger time. Not a word to anyone. Not even my own lawyer. Not yet. The play wasn't about intimidation. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about precision. They thought they understood contracts. They had no idea they were sitting on a live device. Ticking. By the final hour, they weren't even pretending to be civil. "Your valuation request is absurd," Trevor said, flipping the page like he was swatting a fly. "I mean, I knew you were delusional, but this? It's insulting to the process." My wife gave a bored sigh. "Can we just fast-track the house split? We both know he can't afford the upkeep. Let him take the garden tools." Even the paralegal let out a quiet breath that was dangerously close to a chuckle. I sat still, hands folded, one thumb resting gently against the edge of the sealed envelope. which Trevor still hadn't touched. It sat between us like a forgotten appetizer, irrelevant, ignored. Just paper, right? They didn't know it had already begun. That across the city, in 3 different buildings, 3 separate inboxes had just received a pre-alert. Updated compliance bulletin. Code base 7 revocation. Please stand by for confirmation. All that remained was one last switch. One signal. Anything else to add, silent partner? Trevor asked, leaning back in his chair with the relaxed smugness of a man who thought he'd already won. I didn't speak. I just turned my head, slowly, deliberately, toward the analog clock on the wall. 3:16 p.m. He followed my gaze, then raised an eyebrow. Oh, he said theatrically, lifting his wrist and giving the Rolex a mocking shake. Must have forgotten to wind it. Or maybe Cinderella here turns into a man again at midnight. Laughter again, low and grating. My wife smirked, like she was trying not to show how good it felt to humiliate me this completely. And then I smiled. Not forced. Not angry. The kind of smile a man makes when the test results are already in his hand and everyone else is still speculating. Trevor caught it. Just a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He opened his mouth to say something else, but stopped. Something shifted in the room. The air, maybe. Or maybe just instinct. That primal tickle at the back of the brain when you realize something's off. Not loudly off, quietly off. Like the sound of a refrigerator stopping mid-cycle. Like a silence that shouldn't be there. My wife sat straighter. She didn't know why. Her eyes flitted between me, the clock, and her lawyer. 3:16 and counting. Trevor blinked and leaned forward again, this time with slightly less arrogance in his voice. Look, he said, softening his tone like he was doing me a favor. Why don't we cut the drama and just focus on the numbers? You want the condo? Fine. But let's be reasonable. I tilted my head. You think this is about a condo? His lips pressed into a flat line. That was when the intern behind them, the same kid who'd been silent the entire time, accidentally kicked his briefcase under the table. It hit the leg of his chair with a thud. Everyone flinched. Nobody laughed. Trevor straightened his tie. Why are you so calm? He asked. 3:16 and 32 seconds. My lawyer checked his watch. Not the clock on the wall. Not his phone. A proper time-synced wristwatch. He did it like a man checking a tide chart. Trevor's voice lost just a degree of certainty. This some kind of stunt. I looked at him. Not smugly. Not even coldly. Like a man watching the rope snap one thread at a time. You really should open the envelope, I said quietly. He stared at it. Paused. Then scoffed. Later, the intern looked like he was holding his breath. My wife crossed her arms, her foot tapping now. Subtle, anxious. Maybe she felt the shift, too, though she'd never admit it. To her, control was a fragrance. She only noticed its absence when the air smelled different. 3:16 and 50 seconds. A phone vibrated on the table. Not Trevor's. Mine. I didn't touch it. It was the confirmation buzz. Everything was queued. Emails time-locked. Legal filings authenticated. Every document loaded into the investor portal with a trigger tag that read, "Do not open until signal received, 3:17 Eastern Standard Time." Trevor finally reached for the envelope. His fingers hovered over it. 3:16 and 58. 2 seconds. Then 1. And then his phone lit up. 3:17 p.m. The digital tick felt louder than it should have. Just one number flipping over on the wall clock, and suddenly the room was made of glass. Everyone still. Breath caught mid-inhale. Then the sound. BZZZZT. BZZZZT. Trevor's phone lit up on the table. Just a generic, unknown caller, in white text against black. He smirked. Here we go, he said, like it was a bad joke finally coming full circle. Is this where I learn you've got a cousin in organized crime or something? No one laughed this time. He answered on speaker, probably thinking it'd be some pathetic threat he could mock in front of the room. That was his default setting, performative control. But then he froze. No one else could hear the voice. Just him. Just that line, delivered flat and cold by the legal compliance bot Reed had trained for this exact moment. AI generated, time-locked, untraceable. Pursuant to Clause 7 of Licensing Agreement X5A0021, effective 3:17 p.m. Eastern, all usage rights to Codebase 7 are hereby revoked. Investors, vendors, and regulatory bodies have been notified. Continued use constitutes felony-level infringement. This call is being logged and archived per protocol. 11 seconds. No more. Trevor didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. He just sat there, rigid, his eyes locked on nothing. Mouth ajar like someone had poured ice water down his throat. The smirk he'd worn all day didn't slide off. It shattered. The call ended with a soft click. He lowered the phone slowly, like he wasn't sure if it was real. And then, barely audible, he whispered, "Who? Who are you?" I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of strategy. When a man like Trevor asks that question, what he's really asking is, how did I miss this? What he's really afraid of isn't who you are. It's what else you might know. What else you might have done. My wife looked between us, visibly confused. What the hell was that? Trevor didn't answer. She repeated herself louder. Trevor? What was that call? He didn't move. His hands, so steady and performative all afternoon, began to tremble. Not shaking. Trembling. Like the nerves were short-circuiting. Like his body had figured out the truth before his mind did. He finally looked at me. But this time, it wasn't with arrogance. It was like a man seeing a shape in the woods and realizing it's not a tree. Not a shadow, but something with eyes. And teeth. You set this up? I said nothing. Just stared at him like a mirror. Silence poured into the room like concrete. The intern had stopped typing completely. My lawyer sat motionless. Even my wife, so smug an hour ago, now leaned forward, suddenly alert. Alert in the way a deer is just before it bolts. Trevor cleared his throat. Tried to regain some version of himself. This isn't binding. This is just a scare tactic. Then the intern's laptop chimed. He glanced down, squinted at the screen, and his face went pale. What is it? Trevor snapped. The kid turned the laptop toward him, hands shaking slightly. A new email. From a venture capital compliance officer. Subject line in all caps. Urgent. Code-base violation. Funding frozen pending clarification. Trevor didn't breathe. His thumb hovered over the screen like he could somehow undo what had just arrived. My wife reached for his arm. What's happening? She demanded. Trevor stood. Knocked his chair back without noticing. The man who'd spent the whole day posturing, towering, talking over me, suddenly looked shorter. You bastard, he said, not loud, not angry. Just stunned. His phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't answer. He just looked at the envelope. Still sealed. Still there. The one I told him to open at 3:18. He didn't reach for it. He reached for his coat and left the room without another word. The door clicked shut behind Trevor like a gunshot muffled by velvet. My wife half stood, staring after him, her lips parted in silent confusion. Then she turned on me. What the hell just happened? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked at my attorney, Thomas Grant, the only other man in the room who hadn't so much as blinked through the last 60 seconds of implosion. He nodded like we'd reached a checkpoint on a map only we had seen. Then he cleared his throat and calmly said, "May I suggest you read what we brought today?" The envelope. It had sat untouched on the table for nearly 2 hours. Ignored. Dismissed. Like the man who brought it. Now it was the loudest object in the room. My wife frowned. That envelope? What is this, theater? Thomas slid it across the table. This is what you might call context. She snatched it like she expected to find receipts or threats or some last-ditch plea for relevance. What she found instead was a neatly stapled packet of documents. No drama. No color. Just ink, precision, and consequences. The first page, Notice of Immediate Revocation, Licensing Agreement X5A0021. She blinked, scanned, then flipped. Notice of Pending Seizure of Assets, per Clause 12 of IP Protection Statute 64B. What the hell is this? She muttered, eyes narrowing. Flip. Blind copied notification, 17 listed entities. Every one of them an investor, partner, or licensing recipient of the code base currently propping up the firm she'd built her career around. Every one of them already notified. Every one of them now reconsidering their involvement. She stared at the list like it might rearrange itself. It didn't. Then she hit the last page. That's when her face began to change. She didn't gasp or cry or throw the papers. She stopped moving. Right at the bottom of the final page, in red type no larger than 10-point font. Further use after 3:17 p.m. constitutes felony-level infringement. You are currently in breach. Her hands began to tremble. She looked up at me, not with anger, with the first crack of genuine fear. This isn't enforceable, she said, but her voice had lost its anchor. Thomas calmly adjusted his tie. That clause was tested in the Southern District last year. Unanimously upheld. Precedent stands. This is a divorce mediation, she snapped. You can't just drop a federal IP nuke into a divorce proceeding. Thomas tilted his head. He's not just your husband. He let the words hang there. And in that moment, she finally saw it. Not the man who forgot anniversaries. Not the man who didn't push himself or post polished couple photos or try to keep up with her LinkedIn-flavored lifestyle. She saw the man who built something quietly, protected it legally, and waited years to be underestimated by exactly the wrong people, and then waited longer to strike. I didn't know, she said, voice almost small. Trevor. He said the product was safe, that it was clean. I didn't say anything. Let her feel it. Let her sit in it. The idea that she had helped steal something from a man she thought she could erase, and now that theft had come back with interest and legal teeth. Her hands moved across the pages again, slower now, like she was trying to find the part where it said just kidding. But it wasn't there. Instead, halfway through the binder clip, she found the breakdown of investor obligations, what each would lose if the product was frozen, how much money she'd cost them, how many back doors she and Trevor had left open by thinking I'd stay quiet forever. Please tell me this can be undone, she said, not even looking at her attorney anymore. Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a second envelope, thinner. He placed it beside her. This is your updated settlement proposal. Mr. Caldwell is no longer seeking shared assets. Only full separation. No residuals. No equity. No retroactive claims. She stared at it. What's the catch? She asked. No catch, I said. She looked at me again. Really looked. And this time, I didn't smile. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here for the truth to be filed in the right drawer. Her shoulders slumped. She finally understood. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about removing her. Permanently. Quietly. Like a line of code deleted from the root. And she knew. If I could do this without raising my voice, what else had I prepared? What else had I already set in motion? Trevor didn't even make it to the elevator before the first real tremor hit. I watched through the glass wall of the mediation room as he stood in the hallway. Cell phone pressed so tight to his ear, it looked fused to his face. His shoulders were hunched forward now. No more swagger, no more performative dominance. Just a man bracing for impact that had already begun. 3 seconds into the call, he started pacing. By the 7th, he stopped completely, back rigid, one hand clutching his forehead. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the order of operations, because I wrote the playbook they were now trying to survive. The snap clause didn't just revoke the code. It cascaded. The email that had gone out at 3:17 wasn't a simple notice. It contained auto-forwarding logic that sent triggered compliance notices to every connected party. That meant not just investors, but their legal teams, their insurers, and in 3 specific cases, government contractors with oversight obligations. Trevor's firm had taken the code and wrapped it in shiny new branding, then sold it as a defense-grade predictive platform. That last part was their mistake. Once government compliance officers were notified, they didn't ask questions. They shut things down first, then asked later. By 3:45 p.m., the emails were flooding in. One to the General Counsel of Loxley Ventures. Can you confirm your exposure to Codebase 7 prior to revocation timestamp? Another to Alder Tech Systems. Your procurement partner has been flagged in an IP revocation dispute. Recommend pausing integration. My lawyer's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, nodded, then silenced it. They're starting, he said simply. Trevor burst back into the room, red-faced, breathing shallow. He didn't even sit. You need to undo this, he snapped. Right now? Withdraw the filings. Revoke the revocation. I turned to him, calm as ever. That's not how it works. His voice cracked. You have no idea the scale of what you just triggered. I stood slowly, buttoned my jacket, and looked him in the eye. You're right, I said. I don't know the full scale, but I know enough. He opened his mouth again, but his phone rang before he could speak. He glanced at the screen, read whatever it said, and his face drained of what little color remained. He answered instinctively, eyes unfocused. No, it's a misunderstanding. We have it covered. Legal's working on. He stopped mid-sentence, listened, then lowered the phone like it had grown hot in his hand. The sound of a Slack notification pinged from the intern's laptop. Then another, and another, then silence. Trevor, my wife said quietly. She was standing now, too, uncertain. What's happening? He didn't answer her, didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned to my attorney. There's got to be a way out of this. There was, Thomas said. It was called humility. You missed it. Trevor staggered back a step like he'd been hit. I didn't bother to gloat. What was the point? I wasn't there to win. That would have implied I still wanted something from them. I was there to sever. By 4:20 p.m., the firm's legal team had emailed a cease operations request to their dev department. The CTO resigned that evening, after discovering that the production pipeline had been flagged for audit by 3 separate compliance entities. At 4:37, a well-known tech journalist posted the tweet that sent it all over the edge. Breaking. Major licensing breach at AI startup tied to stolen predictive engine. Lawsuit incoming. Sources say. Everything's contaminated. The article hit LinkedIn 20 minutes later. By 5 p.m., their biggest client, a logistics analytics firm with government contracts, officially suspended all integration with Trevor's company pending full investigation. And me? I was already driving home. One hand on the wheel, the other resting on the armrest. Windows down. Air cool. The city around me untouched by the implosion I'd left behind. I didn't listen to music. Didn't take a call. Didn't need to. Behind me, the skyscrapers were still standing. But inside, everything had already begun to collapse. Not with an explosion, but with a quiet, methodical snapping of every beam that held their empire together. Trevor thought I was a broken man with nothing left to lose. He was wrong. I was a builder. And today, I simply built their ending. It was almost dusk when she found me. I'd parked at the far edge of the mediation center lot, under a widespread maple where no one else had dared to go. My car was old but clean, faded paint, quiet engine, everything maintained by habit rather than pride. The kind of car no one notices. She noticed now. I saw her in the side mirror first, storming toward me in heels that had never touched gravel before, waving something in her hand. It looked like the packet from earlier, crumpled now, creased and bent at the corners. Just like her voice when she opened her mouth. You did this. I didn't answer right away. Just watched her. The blazer slightly off-kilter. Her hair frizzed from pacing. The confidence stripped down to raw nerve and mascara lines. She stopped 2 feet from the driver's side door. Stared like she expected me to flinch. I didn't. I asked you a question, she hissed. I met her eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was looking at the woman I married. I was looking at the product she'd become. The curated LinkedIn bio. The cocktail party punchline. The one who replaced conversation with slogans. Authenticity with optics. Marriage with strategy. You used me, I said quietly. Laughed at me. Now you're asking questions. She blinked. No. Trevor, he told me it was safe. That the IP was clean. I didn't know. You didn't ask. She opened her mouth to argue. Closed it again. Then came the pivot. I saw it coming. I'd watched her rehearse it on clients, friends, strangers who didn't buy her narrative the first time. The wide eyes. The softened voice. Look, we were just building something, she said. It got messy, but it wasn't personal. I smiled gently. That's the most personal thing you could have said. She looked around the lot like someone might appear to back her up. No one did. Then came the next tactic. Guilt. After everything we've been through, she asked. You'd nuke my life over what? Some stupid code? A licensing agreement. I leaned against the car, folded my arms. No, not over the code. Not even the betrayal. Over the assumption. The one where you decided I'd never fight back. That I'd go quietly. That I was already erased. Silence stretched between us. A car passed by on the main road behind her. She didn't even flinch. Then, final trick. The tears. They welled up just behind her eyes. Real or performed didn't matter anymore. They were too late either way. Tell me this isn't permanent, she whispered. I opened the door. It's not, I said as I slid into the driver's seat. The reputation hit will only last forever. The legal damages? Just 10 years. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. I started the engine. Wait, she said, her voice cracking now. We can fix this. Maybe if you just talk to the investors, explain that it was a misunderstanding, that. I closed the door, rolled the window halfway down. You remember that dinner party last year? I asked. When you told your friends I was sweet, but obsolete. Her mouth opened. No? That's fine, I said. I didn't forget. Then I shifted into gear. And as the car eased away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She just stood there, alone, still holding the crumpled envelope like it might rewrite itself if she stared hard enough. The last thing I saw before I turned the corner? Her shoulders dropping. Not from exhaustion. From realization. Not just that it was over, but that it had never been a game. And I had never been the fool. Trevor walked into the office the next morning like a man trying to outrun a funeral bell. He'd ditched the tie. The jacket was wrinkled, the shirt collar misaligned. He carried no briefcase, just his phone, gripped like a lifeline, screen smudged with thumbprints from a sleepless night of damage control. His eyes scanned the lobby for recognition, for comfort, for allies. No one looked up. The receptionist pretended not to see him. The junior associate at the far desk suddenly became very invested in a spreadsheet. Even the guy from IT, the one who always cracked a joke about Trevor's Rolex, nodded silently and walked away. He hit the elevator button 3 times. It arrived empty. The ride up felt longer than usual. Upstairs, the floor that once pulsed with productivity now buzzed with a different frequency. Nervous energy, hushed voices, screens turned just slightly away from him. Someone hung up a call mid-sentence when he passed their office. No one smiled. He opened the glass door to the conference room, his old kingdom, and found two board members already inside on Zoom calls. The kind of calls where the cameras are off and no one introduces themselves. The kind where attorneys lurk silently in the background. He cleared his throat. No one acknowledged him. A woman he didn't recognize sat at the far end, typing furiously. Compliance, maybe. Or internal audit. Whatever her title, she didn't look up either. He walked into his office. The lights didn't come on automatically. His assistant wasn't at her desk. There was a sticky note in her place that read, "Working remotely today." He sat down anyway, turned on the monitor, and tried to access his dashboard. Access denied. He tried again. Same result. He picked up the phone to call the CTO. No answer. He called the CFO. Voicemail. He tried the head of legal. Busy signal. It wasn't until 20 minutes later, when an email came through on his personal phone, that the final nail hit. Subject: formal resignation. Trevor, in light of yesterday's events, I'm stepping down effective immediately. I strongly recommend you do the same. The board has already scheduled a vote. Don't come in tomorrow. I'm sorry. Michelle. Michelle was the CFO. They'd had dinner together 3 nights ago. She'd toasted the product launch, called him a machine. Now she wouldn't take his calls. By noon, the firm's Slack channel had been flooded with mandatory compliance statements. Keywords like hold, revoked, exposure, and SEC audit lit up like a crime scene report. He tried calling his wife. No answer. She texted back, finally, for words. "We need to talk." At 2:13 p.m., a paralegal from one of their earliest investors filed a formal complaint in civil court. Willful misrepresentation of code ownership. By 3:40 p.m., a second article dropped. This one had a headline that burned. "Darling of predictive tech implodes after IP theft scandal. Co-founder under scrutiny." The article didn't mention his name directly, but it quoted me. Not by full name, just a single sentence from a prior filing that had now been leaked. They thought silence was the same as surrender. It wasn't. Trevor didn't leave the office that night. He was asked to. A security manager arrived at 5:17 p.m., 2 full minutes before market close. "Board's decision," he said flatly. "I'll give you 10 to collect anything personal." Trevor didn't argue, didn't protest. He gathered his phone, his backup charger, a fountain pen, and a half-eaten protein bar from the desk drawer. Everything else would be boxed and mailed. He didn't ask where to send it. By the time he checked into the hotel, some overpriced suite downtown he used to scoff at for being too middle-tier, his name had already vanished from the company's About page. No press quotes. No bios. Not even a LinkedIn job tag. Scrubbed like a virus. He sat alone in the dim bar that night. Ordered a bourbon. Then another. Then something stronger he couldn't pronounce. The bartender nodded, poured, and moved on. No one asked him what he did. No one recognized him. He sat there, hands wrapped around the glass, eyes unfocused, replaying one moment again and again in his head. The voice. The call. 11 seconds of legal hell wrapped in total composure. "Your phone will ring at 3:17 p.m. He hadn't believed it then. He did now. And in that hotel bar, beneath the noise of other people's lives moving forward, Trevor Caldwell finally heard what his silence sounded like. The conference room this time was much smaller. No glass walls, no chrome chairs, no smug decor designed to impress visiting investors. Just one long oak table, a cheap pot of coffee, and a silent clock ticking above a thermostat that didn't seem to work. 2 weeks had passed. Enough time for the media storm to surge, crash, and settle into long-term consequences. Enough time for Trevor's firm to suspend operations, for lawsuits to stack like firewood, and for the world to move on. Except for the people still buried under it. Today was cleanup. Legal residue. Private arbitration. No press. Just a mediator, 2 attorneys, and the ghosts of every choice that had led them here. My wife sat across from me, blazer buttoned too tight. A neutral expression rehearsed in front of a mirror. Trevor was beside her again, but this time, his suit was wrinkled, and the tie looked like it had been fished out of the trunk of his car. No laptop. No legal pad. No arrogance. Just a man hoping to remain intact. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman with horn-rimmed glasses and tired eyes, opened the folder between us. "Mr. Caldwell has declined all financial restitution," she said. "No damages sought. No retroactive claims." Trevor's head snapped up. He hadn't been briefed. "You're not asking for anything?" he said, suspicious. I didn't look at him. The mediator continued. "He's requesting only one item. Full severance of all shared assets. Clean separation. No entanglements. No further claim or residual connection." My wife looked at me then, not with anger, but with a kind of bruised bewilderment. "You're walking away? After all this?" "I already walked away," I said. "This is just the paperwork catching up." Trevor leaned forward, his voice gravel now. "Why not go for the jugular? You could have bankrupted us completely." I met his eyes. Finally, he flinched. And that's when I understood the real victory. Not that I destroyed his company. Not that the SEC was still circling. Not even that his name had become synonymous with corporate recklessness. The real win was that he was afraid of me now. Because he didn't know what else I'd built. What else I'd prepared. What else I was willing to wait for. He only knew what I'd already done. And that was enough to make him sit still and shut up. The mediator glanced between us. "Do both parties accept the proposed final division?" My lawyer gave a slight nod. So did hers. Trevor didn't move. Just stared at the table like it might swallow him. I stood, straightened my jacket, picked up the pen, signed, then turned to leave. But just before I reached the door, I paused, turned my head slightly, not even enough to see them fully. Just enough that the room had to listen. 317 wasn't about the call, I said. It was about the lesson. And then I walked out. No applause. No speeches. No gavel. Just silence. The kind that doesn't end. Because when you dismantle a life quietly, methodically, and with absolute precision, there's nothing left for them to fight. No rebuttal. No counter. Only the echo of their own mistake. And the memory of the moment it all began.